Well, it's Friday the 11th of October. As we reach the end of the Libra moon, go all out on invigorating, challenging, and compassionate conversation. For now, however, consider who are the people you are out to people please this week and decide if you actually want to in the grand scheme of things. This is episode 1928 of 301 Permanently Moved to Online, a personal podcast 301 seconds in length, written, recorded, and edited in 1 hour by me at the J. Since we last spoke, I've flown to and from Poland, and boy are my arms tired. As I mentioned last week, I was there to moderate a panel discussion on interspecies solidarity between cultural geographer and filmmaker Amy Cutler and the writer Luke Turner. It was a really good discussion. We couldn't just jump into the conversation, as interspecies solidarity as a topic is ultimately, to many people's ears in the current landscape of 2019, a weird idea, to say the least. So instead we felt our way there via Tim Ingold's comments on the difference between moving through space and being on landscape in Against Space, Place, Movement and Knowledge, through Kenneth Olwig's reframing of our relationship to the land from landscape to landship. The discussion then made its way through Anna Singh's Mushroom at the End of the World and Donna Haraway's concept of making kin by encouraging others to foster and recognise a sense of quote-unquote entanglement with the more than human world. We use the words multi-species entanglement a great deal. For my part, it was great to have a conversation with other people in a public setting where you could just roll through the material on topics that we knew really well. From Eduardo Cohen to Monica Gagliano, without needing to pause or explain the concept from scratch. Or we could just mention things like landscapes being haunted by the past in very real and impactful ways. I got the sense during the conversation that for the audience this was a good move, as they grasped the concepts in some intuitive level due to the nature of the conversation, but not necessarily understanding them fully. Amy brought up that there is emergence in emergency, and that there also must be solidarity with the world's extinction. I thought later that the adage, an injury to one is an injury to all, is of more importance now when talking about multi-species entanglement than ever before. A key notion that also came up was around how the human is ultimately a human construction, and therefore subject to all the fallacies and foibles and biases that humans suffer from, and that resonated with the audience too. Luke spoke about the coppicing and pollarding of the forest, how the forest is not necessarily the wild space of one's imagination, that a forest, like Epping, is a collaborative space between humans doing things in the landscape that humans do and the trees themselves. After all, a coppice tree will live far longer than one that was left to grow and die in its own natural timeline. An audience member said that it was one of the best discussions they'd seen in the 4 years they'd been coming to the festival. Hopefully, the talk will be published to the festival archive sometime soon, and I'll let you know when that happens. My solarpunk talk was at midday the next day, a tricky time for the audience, considering it was the Unsound karaoke the night before, and a big thanks to those that showed up on 3 hours sleep to hear me talk about cultural fracking of futures in mainstream media, solarpunk, unfolding, and polyphony. It went well, and the folks thought it was interesting. Obviously, I'll link to that too when it gets posted. The whole festival was great. I got in early in the week, so it was more of the experimental artists. Lingua Ignota performed basically the whole of Caligula from start to finish on my first night. It was an incredible performance. There was a moment when she sang the Kyrie, and it was awesome to see that for the first time in a nominally Catholic country. The atmosphere from the audience turned the room inside out, and you could have felt a pin drop, let alone heard one. I came away really impressed by the one-person live set too. I was also really pleased to have seen Dream Crusher. It was heavy, and I loved every second of it. Of course, as ever, it was a real privilege to be at Unsound. I'm always amazed when anyone invites me to anything, to be honest, and I really do appreciate it. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience at events like Unsound or Sonar as a speaker. Of course, being a speaker is different from being an artist at the music venue, but you also wear the same wristband and get to go to the same places not always afforded to the attendees. I've been incredibly lucky that people have always been generous with their time and attention at events like this. Either I've known other people either performing or speaking at the festival, or there's been friends of friends who have been able to talk and hang out with. This year, I need to give a big shout out to Lisa, Lyra, Jakob, Luke, and Debbie. The reality is, when folks you know go to do something without you or with others, you are in a foreign country, in a foreign city, and you are completely on your own. It happened to me in The Hague this year, and it's a bit bleak. So the atmosphere to combat this is very much dinner at 7:30, bring who anyone you want, and that's really nice. These festivals for me are periods of intense inspiration, being around other creative people, executing on the thing that they love, whether it's writing, music, journalism, etc. Speaking to people about the things that they love doing and are getting to do is obviously inspiring, and it naturally makes you fired up and want to explore your own creative life and want to lean into it harder. It's mainly because the conversation isn't always one big backslapping session either, but there's also those moments that can cut really deep into dealing with one's self-doubt, creative struggles, and one's creative practice and the like. Every time I'm exposed to an environment like this, I'm inspired to do more, create more, and just be more me.